Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something that often gets glossed over when we romanticize the medieval period. You might imagine grand feasts and brave knights, but for most people, life was a constant dance with a far more terrifying foe: hunger. We're not talking about missing a meal. We're talking about the kind of gnawing, soul-destroying starvation that reshaped bodies, minds, and entire societies. It's a brutal truth, a stark contrast to your full fridge and easy access to food. If you're ready to peel back the layers of history and truly understand the weight of an empty belly, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment with where and when you're listening. All right, find that cozy spot, pull your blanket up tight, and let's journey back to a time when survival was a daily struggle against the most fundamental of needs. Imagine, if you will, that you are not nestled in your warm, comfortable bed, but rather you are standing at the edge of your small, hard-won field. It's the late spring or early summer, and the air carries a chill that bites deeper than usual. An unusual dampness clings to your clothes. This isn't just a bad season. You can feel it in your bones, a dread that tightens your stomach even before it goes truly empty. You're looking at the young shoots of your grain, the rye or the oats, perhaps even a patch of barley, and a cold wave of fear washes over you. They are stunted. They are discolored. They are not growing as they should. This isn't a sudden cataclysm, a dramatic earthquake, or a Viking raid. This is far more insidious, a slow creeping rot that begins with the sky itself. You remember the winter, long and bitter, the ground frozen solid for weeks longer than any elder could recall. Then came the spring, not with the gentle warmth and steady rains that coaxed life from the soil, but with an endless cold drizzle. Day after day, a thin, persistent rain, sometimes turning to sleet, has lashed down. The fields are sodden, a thick clay mud that clings to your boots, making every step a struggle. The rich, earthy smell that usually promises a bountiful harvest is replaced by the sickly, sweet odor of decay, of waterlogged plants struggling to breathe. You squat down, your rough wool tunic doing little to keep the damp from seeping into your knees. Your calloused fingers, perpetually chapped from the elements and hard labor, gently probe the soil. It's cold and unresponsive. You pull at a young grain stalk, and it comes away too easily, its roots shallow and weak, a pale, anemic thing. You see the faint yellowing on the leaves, the telltale sign of blight, or perhaps just a lack of vital warmth and sunshine. The older farmers, their faces etched with the wisdom of countless harvests, walk through the fields with a grim silence. They don't need to speak. Their eyes tell the story. This year, the earth has turned against you. You stand up, your back aching, a familiar throb that has nothing to do with recent exertion, but everything to do with years of back-breaking toil. Your village, a cluster of wattle and daub huts huddled around a small church, seems to hold its breath. The usual boisterous sounds of children playing are muted. The banter between neighbors is replaced by hushed conversations, worried glances exchanged over fences. Everyone is watching the sky, willing it to change, to send the sun to dry the fields, to offer a glimmer of hope. But the sky remains an unrelenting canvas of grey, weeping its cold tears onto your world. The first real signs of trouble aren't in the fields, not entirely. They're in the granaries. You remember last autumn's harvest, already leaner than usual. The winter stores were adequate, but only just. Now, as summer approaches, traditionally a time of lighter eating before the abundance of autumn, you feel the pinch more acutely. You walk to the small, dark shed behind your hut, where the precious sacks of dried grain are kept. The air inside is cool, smelling faintly of dust and stored straw. You run your hand over the top of a sack. It feels too light, its contents dwindling faster than they should. You've been carefully rationing, cutting back portions, making every grain count, but still. The level drops relentlessly. Your wife, Ilara, her face already a little gaunt despite the spring, stirs the meagre pot over the hearth. The smell is of thin gruel, watered down, stretched as far as it can go. There's no fat, no meat, just a handful of grain boiled in water, perhaps with a few wild herbs she foraged from the edge of the woods. You watch your children, young Thomas and little Alice, their eyes a little too wide, a little too knowing as they spoon the bland mixture into their mouths. They eat slowly, savouring each mouthful, knowing there will be no second helping. They don't complain. They've learned not to. Their hunger is a quiet, constant companion. The prices at the market in the nearest town have already begun their inexorable climb. You walked there last week, a journey of several hours on foot through muddy tracks. The usual chatter and haggling were subdued. Merchants, their faces grim, guarded their dwindling stocks of flour and dried peas. The few sacks that arrived were snapped up quickly by the richer households, those with coin or valuable goods to trade. For you, with only a few worn tools and perhaps a small piece of woven cloth, the prices were already out of reach. You returned home with an empty pouch and a heavier heart, the weight of the impending crisis pressing down on you. You recall the whispers, the old stories of the famine of your grandparents' time. Stories told in hushed tones around the fire, tales of desperation, of empty bellies, of families broken apart. You always thought of them as just stories, distant echoes of a harsher past. Now those echoes seem to reverberate in the silence of your own home, in the empty spaces in your granary, in the cold, wet soil of your field. The village elder, old Father Theron, with his rheumy eyes and cracked voice, speaks of divine displeasure. He leads more frequent prayers in the church, his voice trembling as he beseeches God for mercy, for a change in the weather. The scent of stale incense and damp stone fills the small church as you kneel, your knees aching, your mind less on the prayers and more on the image of your withered crops. You look at the faces of your neighbours, their expressions mirroring your own fear and unspoken desperation. The community, usually a source of strength, feels fragile, its bonds stretching under the strain of collective dread. Even the animals sense it. Your scrawny chickens peck listlessly at the churned mud around the hut. The single cow you own, a precious source of milk and cheese, has grown thin, her ribs prominent beneath her hide. There's not enough forage for her, and the sparse hay you stored through the winter is almost gone. Her lowing sounds less like a demand and more like a lament. You watch her, calculating how long before you might have to make the terrible decision to slaughter her, to stave off your family's hunger for a few more days, knowing it will cut off a vital source of sustenance for the long term. The thought is a bitter one, a sacrifice that feels like tearing a piece from your own flesh. As the days turn into weeks and the cold rain continues to fall, the reality settles in with a chilling certainty. The harvest will be disastrous. You walk your fields again, your spirit heavy. The grain heads are sparse, many of them barren, others simply rotten in the incessant damp. The promise of food that the earth usually offers has been withdrawn. The sun, when it rarely breaks through the clouds, feels weak, anemic, offering no comfort, no warmth to revive the dying plants. You start to notice changes in your own body, subtle at first. A constant low thrum of hunger in your stomach, not a sharp pain, but a dull, insistent ache. You feel a persistent chill, a coldness that seems to emanate from within, no matter how many layers you wear. Your movements become a little slower, a little more deliberate, conserving energy. You find yourself thinking about food constantly, not just the gruel you have, but the rich, roasted meats you've only dreamed of, the sweet berries of a good summer, the wholesome, crusty bread from a thriving baker. Your dreams become vivid, filled with banquets and overflowing larders, only to wake to the stark, empty reality of your hut. The children, though still small and resilient, are also showing signs. Their laughter is less frequent, their play less energetic. Alice, who used to chase butterflies with boundless enthusiasm, now sits quietly, sometimes clutching her stomach. Thomas, usually a sturdy boy, looks paler and his eyes often drift towards the cooking pot with an intensity that breaks your heart. You try to tell them stories, to distract them, but even your voice feels weak, your imagination dulled by the pervasive anxiety. You begin to spend more time foraging in the woods, desperately searching for anything edible. Wild greens, roots, anything that can be boiled and consumed. You learn to identify plants you once overlooked, herbs that are bitter but nourishing, fungi that could be poisonous if prepared incorrectly. Every outing is a gamble, a desperate search for a few more calories to keep your family alive for another day. You return home exhausted, often with little to show for your efforts. Your hands scratched and mud-stained, your spirit weighed down by the stark reality of dwindling options. The silence in the village grows heavier, punctuated only by the occasional cough, the distant cry of a child, or the mournful tolling of the church bell for another lost soul. The blacksmith's hammer, usually a constant rhythm, is quieter. The weaver's shuttle, once clacking busily, is still. There's less work to be done, less to trade, less energy to do it. Everyone is conserving, everyone is waiting, everyone is dreading what they know is coming. The first whisper of want has become a chilling roar, a profound emptiness that threatens to swallow your entire world. You look at your fields, at the grey sky, at your children's pale faces, and you know with a terrible certainty that this is only the beginning. The famine has begun its cruel march, and you, with your family and your village, are directly in its path. Your modern comfort, your full belly, your abundant choices, they are a world away from this crushing, silent terror that has now become your life. The whisper of want has now transformed into a deafening roar, an incessant, grinding hum of emptiness that resonates from your very core. The granary, once the symbol of your family's security, now echoes with a hollow sound when you walk in. The sacks are not just light, many are completely empty. You've turned them inside out, scraped the last kernels from the corners, even swept the dust from the floor and sifted it for any stray grains. The smell of dust and nothingness is sharp, a bitter scent that clings to your nostrils and seems to permeate your very soul. You remember the frantic efforts of late summer and early autumn, the desperate attempts to salvage anything from the blighted fields. You walked bent-backed for days alongside your wife and children, picking through the withered stalks, finding only a fraction of what you should have. The few meager handfuls of shriveled grain you managed to glean felt like gold, but you knew, even then, it was a pitiful sum, a mere palliative, not a solution. The harvest feast, usually a time of joyous celebration and thanksgiving, was a somber, silent affair, the table barely laden, the faces around it grim with a shared, unspoken dread. Now, as the crisp air of late autumn turns into the biting cold of early winter, the reality is stark. The stores are gone. The small, carefully portioned meals have become even smaller, even thinner. The gruel, once made with a small measure of grain, is now mostly water, barely coloured by a few scraps of wild greens or a handful of dried nettles. It offers little comfort, no sustenance. It merely fills the stomach with liquid, a temporary deceit that lasts only moments before the gnawing hunger returns, sharper and more insistent. Your body has begun to change. The initial dull ache in your stomach has become a constant, burning agony. It's not just a feeling of wanting food. It's a deep, primal pain, a void that aches and cramps and twists. Your stomach has shrunk, and even small amounts of the watery gruel can make you feel temporarily bloated and nauseous. You feel lightheaded when you stand too quickly, the world sometimes tilting on its axis for a moment. Your muscles, once strong from years of labor, feel like jelly, weak and unresponsive. Every movement is an effort, every task a monumental undertaking. Lifting a bucket of water from the well becomes a chore that leaves you breathless and trembling. Your skin, once tanned and robust, is now sallow, stretched taut over your cheekbones. Your eyes, once bright and clear, are sunken deep in their sockets, surrounded by dark circles, giving you a haunted, gaunt appearance. You catch your reflection sometimes in a still pool of water, or in the polished surface of a wooden spoon, and barely recognize the stranger staring back at you. Your hair feels coarse and brittle, your nails weak and prone to breaking. You are shrinking, slowly but relentlessly, consuming your own flesh to fuel the dwindling flame of your life. The world itself seems to have sharpened its edges. The cold seeps into your bones, a constant companion that even layers of worn wool and a weak fire cannot entirely banish. You huddle closer to the hearth, but the dwindling supply of firewood means the fire is rarely more than embers, offering little more than a suggestion of warmth. You shiver constantly, a deep, internal tremor that shakes you even when you're still. The dampness in the hut feels pervasive, clinging to your clothes, to your skin, making you perpetually cold and miserable. The search for food has become an all-consuming obsession. You spend your days ranging further and further from the village, venturing into parts of the forest you once avoided. You become an expert scavenger, your senses heightened by desperation. Your eyes scan the ground relentlessly for a fallen nut, a forgotten berry, a patch of hardy mushrooms that might still be edible. You dig for roots, your fingernails caked with dirt, your hands raw and bleeding from the frozen earth. You learn to distinguish between the edible and the poisonous with a desperate, primal instinct. The taste of these foraged foods is often bitter, gritty and unpalatable, but you force them down, knowing that every calorie is a step away from death. You've tried bark bread, an invention of desperation that turns the inner bark of certain trees into a coarse, unpalatable flour. You strip the bark, carefully choosing the younger, softer layer, and then spend hours scraping, drying, and grinding it. The resulting powder, mixed with what little actual flour you might have left, forms a dense, indigestible lump that sits heavy and uncomfortable in your stomach. It offers little nutrition, but it creates a temporary illusion of fullness, a trick your mind plays on your desperate body. The taste is woody, acrid, and utterly joyless, a testament to how far you have fallen. Your single cow, a precious lifeline, eventually succumbed to the lack of feed. The decision to slaughter her was perhaps the hardest you have ever made. You remember the raw, visceral sadness as you watched her fall, her soft eyes looking at you with a silent plea. But the hunger in your children's eyes was a more powerful force. For a few precious days your family had meat. The taste of it, though stringy and tough, was like nectar, a forgotten pleasure. You devoured every scrap, every morsel, carefully boiling the bones for broth, rendering the meager fat. But the relief was fleeting. The meat was quickly gone, and then you were left with nothing, the absence of the cow, a gaping hole in your meager existence. The silence from her stall, once filled with her gentle lowing, now echoes the emptiness of your larder. The chickens, too, have dwindled. First, their eggs stopped coming, their bodies too starved to produce. Then, one by one, they were taken for meat, small, scrawny birds that offered barely a mouthful of sustenance. You now have no livestock, no source of animal protein, nothing to barter. You are utterly dependent on what you can find, what you can beg, what you can steal, and that's where the moral landscape begins to shift. The bonds of community, once so strong, fray under the relentless pressure of hunger. You see it in the eyes of your neighbors. The initial sharing, the collective efforts, have given way to suspicion and guardedness. People hoard their meager findings, their faces hardened, their hands quick to conceal. You yourself feel the prickle of envy, the bitter resentment when you see someone, perhaps a slightly wealthier peasant, or a luckier scavenger with a slightly larger portion. These thoughts shame you, but they are a constant companion, a dark whisper in your starving mind. The stories of theft begin. A neighbor's small cache of dried apples disappears. A loaf of bread left cooling on a windowsill vanishes. No one speaks of it openly, but the accusations hang in the air, unspoken daggers. You find yourself locking your flimsy door with more care, scanning the shadows as you walk, your trust in your fellow villagers eroding with each passing day of hunger. You tell yourself you would never steal, that your honor is too important, but the relentless ache in your stomach, the sight of your children's hollowed eyes, test the limits of that conviction daily. Even sleep offers little respite. Your dreams are vivid and cruel, filled with banquets and overflowing tables, rich aromas and endless plates of food. You wake with a start, your mouth watering, your stomach growling fiercely, only to find yourself back in the cold, dark hut, the hunger more acute after the tantalizing illusion. Sleep becomes fractured, punctuated by the cold, by the stomach cramps, by the constant anxiety. You lie awake for hours, listening to the shallow breathing of your family, wondering how many more days you can endure. Your children are weaker now. Alice, usually so quick and nimble, moves slowly, her steps faltering. Her skin has an unhealthy pallor, and her once bright hair seems dull and lifeless. Thomas, your sturdy boy, now complains of dizzy spells and a constant chill. You try to coax them to eat the bitter bark bread or the watery gruel, but their appetites have begun to fail. The body, in its final desperate stages, sometimes loses the urge to eat, a cruel mercy before the end. You watch them, helpless, feeling the searing pain of a parent who cannot provide for their young. It is a torment far worse than your own physical suffering. The soundscape of the village has changed dramatically. The laughter of children is a rare, almost shocking sound. The chatter of adults has ceased, replaced by a quiet, strained silence, broken only by the mournful tolling of the church bell, signifying another death. There are more funerals now, somber processions to the small churchyard, the bodies thinner and lighter than they should be, wrapped in simple shrouds. Each death is a stark reminder of your own precarious existence, a chilling glimpse into your own potential future. You, too, feel the insidious pull of weakness. Simple tasks become monumental. Chopping the meager firewood, fetching water from the frozen well, even stirring the pot. Each movement drains you, leaving you breathless and trembling. Your thoughts become muddled, your memory unreliable. It's hard to focus, hard to think beyond the immediate primal need for food. Your world has shrunk, compressed into the narrow confines of your hut, the small, barren patch of land around it, and the desperate, never-ending search for something, anything, to eat. The empty granary, your once reliable store, now echoes not just with the absence of food, but with the profound, soul-crushing despair of a life hanging by a thread. This is not just hunger, this is the slow, agonizing process of your body and spirit being consumed by an emptiness that threatens to devour everything you are. The hunger that gnaws at your insides has ceased to be a mere physical discomfort. It has become a corrosive force, eating away at the very fabric of your being, your morality, and the fragile bonds of your community. It's a relentless, insidious presence whispering dark thoughts, distorting perceptions, and demanding choices you never imagined you would face. You thought the physical pain was bad, but this mental and emotional torment is a deeper, more profound agony. You notice it first in the shifting dynamics within your own home. The usual warmth and camaraderie between you, Elara, and your children have been replaced by a strained tension. Little Alice cries more easily, her small body racked by pangs she doesn't understand. Thomas, once so open, now keeps to himself, his eyes darting furtively, as if constantly assessing threats, even from within his own family. You catch him staring at your meager portion, a silent, desperate plea in his eyes that tears at your soul. You want to give him yours, but the instinct for self-preservation, the primal need to survive, makes you hold back. This internal conflict is a constant battle, a war waged within your own heart. Elara, once your steadfast partner, now has a haunted look. Her usual gentle touch is sometimes sharp, her voice often frayed. You argue over the smallest things, who got the larger share of the bark bread, whether a piece of rotten wood should be burned for warmth or saved for later. These are not real arguments, but symptoms of the pervasive stress, the constant, low-level irritation that starvation breeds. Sleep deprivation, coupled with the relentless pain of an empty stomach, makes everyone irritable, quick to anger, slow to forgive. You see yourself reflected in her eyes, a gaunt, desperate shadow of the man she married. The love is still there, deep beneath the surface, but it is strained, almost submerged by the overwhelming demands of survival. Outside your hut, the village has become a changed place. The collective spirit, the willingness to help, which once defined your community, has evaporated like morning dew in a fleeting sun. Neighbors who once shared tools and laughter now eye each other with suspicion. Their faces are drawn, their eyes hollow, their movements slow and guarded. The sounds of everyday life have vanished. There's no longer the cheerful clatter of the blacksmith, the rhythmic thud of the mill, or the gossip shared over a communal wash basin. Only the wind, howling through cracks in the wattle and daub, and the occasional cough or whimper from a dying child break the desolate silence. You witness the first overt acts of desperation. A farmer whose field was ravaged even worse than yours is caught trying to steal a scrawny chicken from a wealthier neighbor's coop. He's beaten, not with the usual village justice of a few swift blows and a warning, but with a cold, brutal intensity that speaks of accumulated fear and rage. You watch, horrified, as he's left bleeding in the mud, his cries mingling with the harsh jeers of those who still have something to protect. You feel a flicker of pity, a pang of recognition, but also a chilling understanding. That could be me. The line between victim and perpetrator has blurred, the rules of common decency eroded by the primal scream of hunger. The small church, once a beacon of hope and solace, now feels strangely detached. Father Theron still preaches, his voice weaker now. His sermons increasingly focused on sin and judgment, on the mysterious ways of a punishing God. But you find it harder to believe, harder to find comfort in his words. Where is God's mercy in this suffering? Your prayers feel hollow, your faith a fragile thing struggling against the overwhelming reality of your empty belly and dying children. You see others in the church, their faces mirroring your own doubt, their eyes glazed over, perhaps too weak to fully comprehend his words, their minds consumed by the immediate need for food. You yourself are forced to make choices that prick at your conscience. You find a patch of wild onions, enough for a meager addition to the gruel. You consider sharing with the elderly widow next door, whose light has not been lit for 2 days. But then you think of Alice's sunken cheeks, of Thomas's persistent cough, and the primal urge to protect your own family overwhelms your sense of charity. You sneak back into your hut, your heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and a desperate animalistic triumph. The taste of the onions, sharp and bitter, feels like ash in your mouth, tainted by the shame of your selfishness. The concept of time has become distorted. Days bleed into one another, marked only by the growing weakness in your limbs and the tightening grip of hunger. You live minute by minute, hour by hour, your world narrowed to the immediate struggle for survival. The past, with its memories of abundance, seems like a distant dream, a cruel joke. The future is an unimaginable void, too terrifying to contemplate. All that exists is the brutal, demanding present. You observe the subtle changes in the very fabric of human behavior. People become possessive of even trivial things. A child finds a dropped coin in the mud, and an adult snatches it away, their face contorted with desperation. The concept of mine becomes fiercely defended, often with violence. Small acts of kindness, once commonplace, become rare and precious, illuminated against the darkness of widespread selfishness. You see people avert their gaze, unwilling to meet your eyes, to acknowledge the shared suffering. because to do so would imply a responsibility they cannot afford to bear. The whispers turn darker. Stories circulate of families abandoning their weakest members, the very old, the very young, those too sick to contribute. You hear hushed tales of travelers disappearing on the roads, their fate left to grim speculation. The unspoken horror of what extreme hunger can drive people to becomes a constant, chilling undercurrent in the village. You try to push these thoughts away, to cling to the remnants of your humanity, but they return, insistent, knocking at the door of your conscience. Your dreams, when they come, are not just about food. They are filled with chaotic images of violence, of desperate struggles, of shadowy figures fighting over scraps. You wake in a cold sweat, your heart racing, the fear palpable. The line between waking nightmare and actual reality feels increasingly thin. You become paranoid, constantly vigilant, scanning for threats, for signs of others' desperation, knowing that a starving man is capable of anything. Even the simple act of walking to the well becomes a psychological ordeal. You pass by other huts, noting who still has a faint wisp of smoke from their chimney, who seems to be holding on, and who has gone silent. You try not to meet the eyes of the other villagers, knowing that to do so is to acknowledge a shared burden, a silent plea for help that neither of you can offer. There's a profound loneliness that settles upon you, a sense of isolation even amidst your family and community. Each person is fighting their own private war against the hunger, against the dark thoughts it breeds. The physical effects are now profound. Your hair is falling out in clumps. Your teeth ache, your gums bleed. You have a constant metallic taste in your mouth. Your digestive system is in revolt, alternating between agonizing constipation and debilitating diarrhea, leaving you even weaker, even more dehydrated. Your clothes hang loosely on your shrunken frame, the once snug fabric now flapping around your emaciated limbs. You are a walking skeleton, your skin a thin parchment stretched over sharp bones. You reflect on what it means to be human. Is it your ability to reason, to create, to connect? Or is it merely a thin veneer stripped away by the raw, brutal force of hunger, revealing the primal animal beneath? You find yourself instinctively reacting, snarling internally at anyone who might threaten your meager resources, your thoughts consumed by the basic, unyielding imperative to survive. The sophisticated thoughts and emotions you once possessed seem to wither and die, replaced by a singular, consuming drive. The hunger has not just consumed your body, it has devoured your spirit, your compassion, your sense of self. You are no longer just a farmer, a husband, a father. You are a being driven by the relentless, all-encompassing need for food, a need so potent it has stripped away everything else. You watch your children, and you know that this hunger is not just devouring you, but them too, slowly, inexorably, taking from them not just their strength, but their innocence, their trust, their very childhood. The echo of the empty granary has given way to the silence of a ravaged soul, a profound emptiness that threatens to consume all that remains. As the gnawing hunger reaches its crescendo, another, even more terrifying enemy begins to sweep through your weakened village: disease. It's not the sudden, dramatic plague that might strike a healthy populace, but a creeping, insidious sickness that preys upon the already vulnerable, the starved, the cold, the utterly depleted. You realize with a chilling certainty that hunger is not merely a path to death. It is a gateway opening wide for a host of other grim reapers. You first notice it in the children. Little Alice, who has been growing progressively weaker, begins to cough. It's a dry, hacking cough at first, then deep and rattling, tearing through her tiny chest. Her breath becomes shallow, her skin feels unnaturally hot to your touch, despite the pervasive cold in the hut. Her eyes, already sunken, take on a glassy, distant look. She cries less now, too weak for even that expression of distress, lying listless on her straw pallet. You hold her, her small frame feeling impossibly light. and her feverish skin burns against your own chilled hand. Then comes the swelling. You see it in the limbs of some of the older villagers, their ankles and feet growing puffy, then their bellies distending, a grotesque parody of fullness. This is hunger edema, a cruel irony where the body, starved of protein, loses its ability to regulate fluids. Their skin shines tautly, stretched and shiny, and when you press a finger into it, the indentation remains for a moment, a chilling testament to the waterlogged flesh beneath. These are bodies that appear full, but are in fact dying, suffocating from within. You look at your own hands, your own ankles, constantly checking for the telltale puffiness, dread filling you. Dysentery is another scourge. The already scarce water supply becomes contaminated, and with weakened immune systems, people fall ill quickly. You hear the terrible retching and the desperate cries from neighboring huts. The stench of sickness, of bodily fluids, becomes a familiar, sickening presence in the stale air of the village. The afflicted suffer from agonizing stomach cramps, unending diarrhea, dehydrating them further, stripping away what little fluid and electrolytes their bodies have left. The lack of proper sanitation means the disease spreads like wildfire, turning entire families into moaning, helpless shells. You find yourself spending precious, dwindling energy digging graves, each new burial a heavier blow to your already broken spirit. Your own body, perpetually exhausted and starved, feels like a battleground. Your immune system, compromised by months of nutritional deprivation, has ceased to function effectively. Every sniffle, every cut, every minor ailment that a healthy body would shrug off becomes a potential death sentence. A simple splinter in your finger festers, turning red and angry, threatening to bloom into a full-blown infection. Your gums bleed constantly, your teeth feel loose, and the perpetual cold that clings to you makes you susceptible to chills and fevers. You watch Thomas, your son, his cough worsening. He's thin, terribly thin, his clothes hanging off him like rags. He lies on his pallet, too weak to rise, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Elara, herself barely able to stand, hovers over him, her face a mask of profound grief and helplessness. You try to remember the remedies your mother taught you, the herbal poultices, the warming teas. But the herbs are scarce, the fire too weak to properly brew them, and your hands tremble too much to apply them with care. You are a farmer, a worker of the land, not a healer. You stand by, a powerless witness to your son's slow decline. The village elder, Father Theron, too, falls ill. His cough grows worse, and his skin turns yellow, his eyes jaundiced. He lies in his small dwelling, tended by a few desperate women, but there is little they can do. His sermons cease, the church bell, once ringing for prayer, now tolls only for the dead. His demise leaves a gaping hole in the spiritual life of the village, severing one of the last ties to hope and tradition. The silence from the church is a heavy, suffocating blanket. Typhus, carried by lice that thrive in unwashed, crowded conditions, also makes its dreaded appearance. You begin to see the telltale rash on the bodies of the sick, the dark spots appearing on their pale skin. The victims suffer from high fevers, unbearable headaches, profound weakness, and often delirium. Their minds wander, their words become nonsensical, and their bodies convulse. You try to keep your family clean, but with no soap, no proper bathing facilities, and the constant need to conserve energy, it's an impossible task. The very air seems to carry the seeds of death. The smell of death becomes pervasive. Not just the scent of unwashed bodies and sickness, but the unmistakable metallic tang of bodies succumbing. You try to bury the dead quickly, but there are too many and too few strong enough to dig the frozen earth. The small churchyard grows crowded, the makeshift graves shallow, covered with stones and branches to deter scavengers. Each passing, each somber procession, each new mound of earth reinforces the crushing reality that you are living in a charnel house, surrounded by the dying. You yourself begin to experience the symptoms. A dull headache pounds behind your eyes, a constant companion. Your muscles ache with a profound weariness that sleep cannot alleviate. You feel a perpetual dizziness, a blurring of your vision. You find yourself nodding off unexpectedly, only to be jolted awake by the cold or the cramping of your stomach. Your hands and feet feel perpetually numb, your circulation failing. You are slowly shutting down, your body conserving its last vestiges of energy for the most basic functions. The knowledge that your sickness is not random, but a direct consequence of the hunger, makes it even more bitter. You know that if you had enough food, enough warmth, enough strength, you might fight it off. But you are hollowed out, a mere shell, and any illness that takes root finds easy purchase, a willing host. The lack of medicines, the primitive understanding of hygiene, the utter absence of any kind of medical care makes the situation feel utterly hopeless. You are simply waiting, watching your body betray you, day by agonizing day. You watch Alara, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her own body frail as she struggles to comfort Alice, whose breathing has grown shallow and ragged. You tell yourself to be strong, to hold on, but inside a profound despair has taken root. You've fought the hunger, you've scavenged, you've made impossible choices, but now this unseen enemy, this plague of the starved, feels invincible. The village, once a collection of interdependent families, has become a scattering of isolated, dying households. There's no one left with the strength or the will to help. Those who are not sick are too weak, too preoccupied with their own survival. The sounds of human life are replaced by the mournful wind and the occasional chilling sound of a cough, a moan, or the tolling of a distant, unseen bell. The shadow of disease hangs heavy over everything, a pervasive, suffocating presence that promises to claim what hunger began. You feel its cold breath on your neck, its insidious tendrils creeping into your own weakened body. You are not just starving, you are dying. Slowly, from within, surrounded by the dying, your world collapsing into a nightmare of sickness and despair. Your modern world, with its hospitals, its pharmacies, its doctors, its understanding of nutrition and sanitation, seems like a miracle, an impossible fantasy compared to this brutal, inescapable reality. The silence of your dying village has become unbearable, punctuated only by the cries of the sick and the mournful tolling of the bell for the growing number of dead. Your children, Alice and Thomas, are now mere shadows of their former selves, too weak to play, too weak to even speak much. You've watched helplessly as the light fades from their eyes, as their small bodies waste away. The knowledge that staying here means certain death, not just for you and Alara, but for the last flickering embers of your children's lives, becomes an unbearable weight. A desperate, almost suicidal hope sparks within you. Perhaps, just perhaps, there is food elsewhere. The decision is agonizing. To leave your home, your ancestral land, your family's history, is to tear out a piece of your soul. But the alternative is to watch your family die, slowly, agonizingly, in the cold, silent confines of your hut. So one bleak morning, under a sky as grey and desolate as your heart, you make the choice. You will walk, you will seek succor, salvation, food, in another village, another town, anywhere the famine's icy grip has not yet tightened. You gather what little you have left. A few worn tools, a thin patched wool blanket, a small empty leather pouch, a water skin that you pray you can refill. Alara, her face drawn and pale, bundles Alice onto her back, the small child too weak to walk more than a few steps. You lift Thomas, his legs like brittle twigs, and place him carefully on your shoulders. His small, light weight is a chilling testament to his starvation. Your own body, racked by hunger and incipient illness, protests with every movement, but the desperate resolve in your heart pushes you forward. As you step out of your hut, the cold bites deep. The air is damp, carrying the familiar, sickening smell of decay and damp earth. The village looks desolate, a collection of empty shells, many of the doors hanging open, revealing the abandoned interiors. No one looks up as you pass. Those who remain are either too weak to notice or too consumed by their own despair. You exchange a final long look with Ilara, a silent vow to survive or to die trying. And then, with a heavy heart and a pounding chest, you begin your desperate journey. The road, usually a familiar path winding through familiar fields, now feels alien and menacing. The fields, once fertile and green, are barren and brown, the ghost of a failed harvest clinging to the withered stalks. The trees along the path are skeletal, their branches bare, rattling like bones in the frigid wind. Every step is an effort. Your legs, weakened by hunger, ache with a dull, persistent pain. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, misting in the cold air. Thomas's head rests heavily on your shoulder, and you feel his shallow breathing against your neck. You pray he will last. The landscape itself is bleak, a desolate canvas of grey and brown. The few houses you pass are either deserted or silent, their windows dark, their chimneys cold. There's no sign of life, no welcoming smoke, no bark of a dog. The world has emptied out, swallowed by the famine. You constantly scan the horizon, desperate for a glimpse of hope, a sign of human warmth, a wisp of smoke, anything. But there is only the vast, indifferent emptiness. The greatest danger, however, is not the elements nor the lack of food. It's other desperate humans. As you walk, you clutch the small, rusty knife you carry under your tunic, a useless defense against a truly determined aggressor. You've heard the stories of bandits, not the flamboyant outlaws of tales, but gaunt, desperate men driven to violence by starvation, preying on the few travelers still brave or foolish enough to venture onto the roads. You avoid meeting the eyes of the rare individuals you encounter, fearing their desperation, their potential violence. You try to look strong, purposeful, but you know you are a mere shadow of your former self, a walking target for anyone with a modicum of strength. You pass a small, abandoned homestead, its roof partially collapsed, its door hanging ajar. You peer inside, a primal urge to search for anything edible, but it is utterly empty, scavenged clean long ago. The air inside is cold and dead, the stench of disuse and decay hanging heavy. You hurry past, the bleakness of the scene a chilling reminder of your own precarious existence. The physical toll of the journey is immense. Every half hour you have to stop, your muscles screaming, your lungs burning. You rest against a tree, your head swimming, the world around you sometimes blurring at the edges. Ilara sinks to the ground, her face pale, sweat beading on her forehead, despite the cold. Alice whimpers on her back, her small body trembling. You try to offer words of encouragement, but your voice is a dry, rasping whisper, and they know as you do that your strength is failing. Water, too, becomes a precious commodity. The streams are frozen, the wells often dry or stagnant. You learn to recognize the subtle signs of a spring, a patch of greener moss, a faint trickle. When you find water, it's often murky, icy cold, but you drink it greedily, your throat parched, your body craving hydration. The risk of disease from contaminated water is ever present, but it's a risk you're forced to take as the sun begins to set, casting long, menacing shadows across the desolate landscape. A new fear grips you, the fear of the night. The cold becomes intense, biting through your thin clothing. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the faint glow of the stars, offering no comfort. You find a small, sheltered alcove beneath a rocky overhang, huddled together for warmth, pulling the single blanket tight around your family. The ground is hard and cold, digging into your starved bones. Sleep is a fitful, shallow thing, broken by shivers, by stomach cramps, by the sounds of the night, the rustling of unseen creatures, the howl of a distant wolf, sounds that now fill you with dread rather than merely annoyance. You dream of food again, a cruel torment. This time, you dream of the specific, simple dishes your mother used to make, the warmth of the hearth, the comforting aroma of baked bread. You wake with a sob catching in your throat, your stomach a knot of pain, the cold reality crushing you. You look at Ilara, her eyes wide open, staring into the darkness, and you know she too is suffering, her mind conjuring similar tormenting visions. The journey continues, day after day, each one a replica of the last. Your steps become more faltering, your mind more muddled. Your feet are raw and blistered, your shins ache with every step. You fall more often, stumbling over unseen roots and stones, your body too weak to regain its balance. Thomas, on your shoulders, is mostly silent now, his breathing shallow, his little body barely responding when you try to speak to him. Alice on Ilara's back has grown heavy with a chilling stillness. You pass corpses on the road, gaunt figures collapsed by the wayside, their clothes ragged, their faces frozen in expressions of agony or resignation. They are reminders of the inevitable fate that awaits you if you fail. You avert your gaze, not out of disrespect, but out of a primal fear, a desperate refusal to acknowledge the stark reflection of your own future. They are the ones who couldn't make it, and you wonder, with a sickening lurch in your stomach, if you will be next. After what feels like an eternity, but has probably only been a few days, you see a faint wisp of smoke on the horizon. Hope, a fragile, desperate thing, flares in your chest. A village, a town. A place where there might be food, warmth, a chance. You push yourself forward, forcing your aching legs to move faster, ignoring the protests of your burning lungs. But as you draw closer, the hope drains from you, replaced by a cold dread. The smoke is thin, weak. The village itself looks eerily quiet, just like your own. The fields around it are barren, the granaries look empty. You approach with trepidation, and what you find crushes your spirit. The people here are no better off than you. Their faces are gaunt. Their eyes hold the same haunted look. They eye you with suspicion, with hostility, with a desperate fear that you are another mouth to feed, another competitor for their own dwindling resources. There is no succor here, no charity, no food to be spared. You are met with cold stares, with averted gazes, with the unspoken message, "We have nothing for you, turn back." You try to speak, your voice a rasp, to beg for a morsel, for a drop of broth, but your words catch in your throat, lost to the profound despair that washes over you. You are an unwanted ghost, a stark reminder of their own precarious existence. You turn away, your heart heavy, the last spark of hope extinguished. The desperate journey has been in vain. You carry your children, your wife walks beside you, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The knowledge that you have risked everything, spent your last reserves of strength for nothing, for an illusion, is a bitter, crushing blow. The road stretches out before you, endless and unforgiving, leading to nowhere but death. The cold wind whips around you, a lament for your futile efforts, and you know with a chilling certainty that the end is drawing closer with every agonizing, desperate step. Your modern world, where seeking help is a phone call away, where charities and government aid exist, is an unimaginable paradise compared to this bleak, unforgiving landscape. The desperate journey has ended not in salvation, but in the crushing realization that there is no escape. The surrounding villages offer no relief, only the same gaunt faces, the same empty granaries, the same chilling silence. You have returned to the periphery of your own dying community, too weak to venture further, too broken to hope. The hunger has intensified, a constant, searing pain that now feels like it's consuming your very soul. And with this profound, inescapable hunger come the unspeakable choices, the terrifying descent into the darkest corners of human desperation. You try to block out the whispers, the rumors that float like venomous spirits through the skeletal remains of your village. But they are persistent, insidious, tapping at the locked doors of your conscience. Stories of missing children, of bodies found mangled in the woods, of strange, unidentifiable meat sold in hushed tones. You try to tell yourself they are just tales, born of madness and fear, but a cold dread coils in your stomach. A dread that has nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with the deepest, most primal fear of humanity undone. You walk through the desolate village, your eyes darting, your senses heightened by paranoia. You see a neighbor, once a kindly old woman who would offer sweets to your children, now staring at you with an unnerving intensity, her eyes devoid of warmth, filled with a primal, animalistic hunger that makes your skin crawl. You avert your gaze, quickening your pace, a terrifying understanding dawning in your mind. The taboos, the sacred laws that bind human beings, are eroding under the crushing weight of absolute starvation. The hardest choice begins with your children. Little Alice, your sweet, gentle daughter, is barely clinging to life. Her breathing is shallow, her body emaciated, her eyes glazed over, fixed on some unseen point in the distance. She is too weak to cry now, too weak to even whimper. You hold her, her tiny bones sharp against your hand, and a wave of profound, aching despair washes over you. Alara beside you is weeping silently, her body shaking with grief and exhaustion. You look at Thomas, your son, a little stronger perhaps, but still terribly frail, his life also hanging by a thread. The chilling thought whispers in your mind, a thought so monstrous you try to crush it, to bury it deep beneath layers of revulsion. If one dies, the other might have a chance. If you focus your meager energy, your dwindling resources on keeping just one alive, perhaps that one could make it. The idea is a searing brand on your soul, a betrayal of everything you believe, everything you are. But the hunger and the fear of losing both is a relentless, cruel tormentor. You watch Alara, her eyes meeting yours, and you see the same unspeakable thought reflected in their depths. The silence between you is heavy with the horror of this shared, monstrous consideration. You don't speak it aloud, you can't, for to utter the words would be to give them form, to make them real, but the understanding is there. A terrible, unspoken communion in the face of ultimate despair. How do you choose? How do you play God with the lives of your own children? The very essence of your parental love, your protective instinct, is twisted and perverted by the famine's cruel logic. Then comes the thought of selling them. You've heard the rumors, hushed tales of wealthy merchants or desperate families in unaffected regions buying children, sometimes as servants, sometimes for darker purposes. The thought is equally repellent, a vile transaction that would sever your family forever. But the alternative, to watch them both perish slowly, could that be worse? You imagine Alice, bright-eyed and curious, living a life of servitude, far from you but alive. You imagine Thomas, strong and spirited, working as an apprentice, his stomach full. The image is a bittersweet torment, a desperate fantasy. You know that such a choice would haunt you until your dying breath, a wound that would never heal. But the hunger, the primal need to ensure some survival, pushes these thoughts to the forefront of your mind, demanding consideration. You recall the desperate accounts from your grandfather, who survived the Great Famine in his youth. He spoke in fragmented sentences, his eyes distant, of things no man should ever see, of choices that burn the soul. He never elaborated, but the horror in his voice, the tremor in his hands, told a story far darker than any words could convey. Now you understand. You are living his nightmare, the most extreme depths of human depravity, whispered about in terrified tones, are the stories of cannibalism, the desperate, animalistic act of consuming human flesh to survive. You've dismissed them as macabre legends, the fever dreams of the insane. But then you hear concrete, chilling accounts from a neighboring village. A family found eating something unidentifiable, their eyes wild, their faces streaked, a child vanishing, only for a strange smell to emanate from a hidden pot. The horror makes your stomach lurch, not from hunger, but from a profound existential revulsion. You clench your jaw, your hands trembling, forcing yourself to deny that such a thing could ever cross your mind, that your humanity could ever sink so low. But the very fact that the thought flickers, even for a split second, in the darkest recesses of your starving brain is a testament to the famine's terrible power. You start to see the world differently, not as a collection of people, but as sources of calories. The scrawny dog that wanders into your village is not a companion, but a potential meal. The rat that scurries across your floor is a prize, not a pest. And then the most horrifying thought, the weakened bodies of the dead. You see the gaunt corpses being carried to the churchyard, and a perverse, twisted part of your brain, a part you hate, wonders about their utility, their potential to sustain life. You recoil from these thoughts, shaking your head vigorously, trying to dislodge the monstrous images, but they cling like leeches, fed by the constant burning agony in your stomach. Your dreams, when they come, are no longer about bountiful feasts, but about these unspeakable choices. You see yourself making them, committing acts that fill you with self-loathing, waking in a cold sweat, screaming silently into the darkness, your heart pounding with horror. The line between nightmare and reality is now completely blurred. Your waking hours filled with the shadows of these dark thoughts. The very concept of right and wrong has become a luxury you can no longer afford. Morality, dignity, compassion. These are things that belong to a time of plenty, a time when basic survival was not a daily battle. Now there is only the stark, brutal imperative to survive by any means necessary. Your identity, your sense of who you are, is being stripped away, revealing a primal, desperate creature driven by instinct. You watch Ilara, her face now completely ravaged by grief and hunger, as she makes a decision. She picks up Alice, cradles her for a long moment, a tear-soaked farewell, and then, with a strength born of unimaginable pain, she walks out of the hut. You don't ask where she is going, you don't follow. You know. You know she is making the unspeakable choice. Perhaps leaving Alice at the church door, or taking her to the edge of the forest, hoping against hope that some passing merchant, some stranger will find her, take her, give her a chance at a life you can no longer provide. The silence in the hut after she leaves is deafening, filled with the echo of a lost child, a broken family, and a shattered soul. You curl into yourself, weeping dry, agonizing sobs, the hunger in your stomach now completely overshadowed by the crushing weight of your choices, by the profound horror of what you have become. This is the deepest abyss of starvation, where humanity itself is devoured by the relentless, cruel demand to survive. Your modern sensibilities, your moral compass, would be utterly shattered in this terrifying, unfathomable reality. The immediate horror of the famine has, by some miracle, begun to recede, but the scars it has left are deep, indelible marks on your body, your mind, and the very soul of your community. You have survived, a feat that feels both miraculous and profoundly sorrowful. But survival has come at an unspeakable cost, a debt that will cling to you like a shroud for the rest of your days. The lingering scar of hunger is not just a memory, it is a permanent alteration of who you are. The first, most obvious scar is etched onto your physical form. You are thinner than you ever were before the famine, your frame skeletal, your muscles wasted. Even with the gradual return of some meager food, your body struggles to regain its former strength. You tire easily, your lungs burning after only a few moments of exertion. Your digestive system, ravaged by months of starvation and the consumption of indigestible substances, is perpetually in disarray. You suffer from chronic stomach pains, bouts of nausea, and an inability to properly absorb nutrients. The food you now eat, though a blessing, often causes discomfort, a cruel irony. Your skin remains sallow and dry, your hair brittle and sparse, your teeth loose and aching. You look older than your years, your face prematurely lined, your eyes still sunken and haunted, bearing the indelible mark of what you have endured. You move with a slow, deliberate caution, conserving energy, a habit ingrained by months of extreme privation. The cold still seems to penetrate your bones with ease, a persistent internal chill that even the warmest fire cannot entirely banish. Your body remembers the cold, the emptiness, and it will never truly forget. The most profound scars, however, are hidden within. Your mind is a landscape reshaped by trauma. You are constantly anxious, perpetually scanning for signs of impending disaster. A sudden drop in temperature, a patch of cloudy sky, a slight delay in the harvest, each is met with an immediate, visceral dread, a panic that grips your chest and leaves you breathless. The fear of hunger, of that agonizing, soul-crushing emptiness, has become a permanent resident in your psyche. You find yourself hoarding food even when there is enough. Every morsel is precious, carefully guarded. You stash away dried berries, a few kernels of grain, a piece of hard cheese, hiding them in secret spots, unable to shake the irrational. Fear that the famine will return, that you will wake one morning to find your larder empty once more. The thought of throwing away even a stale crumb is anathema, a horrifying waste that makes you physically ill. You eat every meal slowly, deliberately, savoring each mouthful, even if the food is plain, because you remember too well the agonizing emptiness. Sleep is still a troubled companion. The vivid dreams of feasts have been replaced by nightmares of desperation, images of your children's gaunt faces, the silent cries of the dying, the terrible choices you were forced to contemplate. You wake in a cold sweat, your heart pounding, the horror of those moments returning with a chilling clarity, the sense of profound loss, of what you endured and what you sacrificed, settles over you, a heavy blanket of sorrow that never fully lifts. The bonds of your family, those survivors, are forever altered. Alara, your wife, shares your trauma. Aze is gone, an empty space in your family and in your hearts. The unspoken grief, the shared horror of that choice hangs between you, a silent testament to the unspeakable. You communicate more with glances, with shared silences than with words. The old intimacy, the easy laughter, has been replaced by a quiet, somber understanding, a shared burden that binds you together in a new, more somber way. You cherish Thomas, your surviving son, with a fierce, almost desperate love, a constant fear gnawing at you that he too could be taken, that this fragile piece could shatter at any moment. You watch him constantly checking for signs of weakness, of illness, unable to shed the parental paranoia born of absolute despair. The community, too, bears deep, festering wounds. The old trust has been shattered. Suspicion and resentment linger like a foul odor. You remember who hoarded, who stole, who abandoned their kin, and others remember your choices, your actions, your desperation. The easy camaraderie of before is replaced by a guardedness, a cautious distance. People still gather for church, for communal work, but the warmth is gone, replaced by a strained politeness, a veneer of civility stretched thin over deep-seated grievances and traumas. The village is rebuilding, but it is rebuilding with ghosts, with shadows of the past clinging to every hut, every field, every face. Children born during and immediately after the famine are smaller, weaker, more susceptible to illness. They carry the physical legacy of their parents' starvation, their growth stunted, their health fragile. Their eyes hold an ancient wisdom, a knowing sadness that belies their young age. They grow up hearing the hushed stories, seeing the lingering pain in their parents' eyes, learning the harsh lessons of scarcity and survival from birth. They will never know true abundance, never truly shed the fear of the empty larder. You find yourself reflecting on the nature of humanity. What does it mean to be human when stripped of all comfort, all security, all dignity? You saw the worst of humanity and you saw it in yourself. The capacity for selfishness, for cruelty, for desperation, for the unspeakable has been revealed to you with brutal clarity. And while you survived the knowledge of that darkness, of what you were capable of, what you considered never leaves you. It is a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of your conscious thoughts, a chilling reminder of your own fragility. The taste of food, even now, carries a complex flavor. It is a blessing, a miracle, a source of life. But it is also tainted by memory, by the agony of its absence, by the ghost of starvation. You eat to live, yes, but you also eat to forget, to push back the gnawing fear, to fill not just your stomach, but the hollow spaces in your soul. You will teach your children and their children the lessons of the famine. To be frugal, to be prepared, to respect the land, to never waste a single grain. These lessons will be passed down not as abstract wisdom, but as a living, breathing testament to a time of unimaginable suffering. The fear will be in their bones, in their very DNA, a collective memory of the famine's brutal lesson. The world outside your village, once a mysterious, distant place, now feels hostile and unforgiving. You are wary of strangers, suspicious of outsiders. You have learned that in times of crisis you are truly alone, reliant only on your own strength, your own cunning, your own desperate choices. The grand narratives of kings and queens, of empires and battles, feel utterly irrelevant to your lived experience. Your world is small, focused on the immediate, on the delicate balance between life and death, sustenance and starvation. The lingering scar of the famine is a permanent part of you. It's in the way you breathe, the way you move, the way you look at a loaf of bread. It's in the profound gratitude you feel for the simplest things, a full stomach, a warm fire, the gentle breathing of your surviving son. It is a constant reminder of the fragility of existence, the thin veil that separates civilization from chaos, abundance from absolute want. You are a survivor, yes, but you are also a living monument to a trauma that has reshaped your entire being, leaving an indelible mark that time, and even a full belly, can never truly erase. Your modern world, where the memory of food scarcity is distant history for most, cannot fathom the weight of such a lasting wound. After the unimaginable depths of despair, after the unspeakable choices and the relentless march of disease, there comes a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air. You notice it first, not with your eyes, but with a faint stirring in your spirit, a tentative tremor of something akin to hope. The biting, relentless cold of winter finally begins to recede, replaced by a fragile, hesitant warmth in the spring sun. It's not a sudden, dramatic change, but a slow, agonizing crawl towards something that promises life instead of death. You step outside your hut one morning, and the air smells different. Not of the pervasive damp and decay, but of thawing earth, a faint, almost forgotten scent of rebirth. The mud around your hut, once a frozen, treacherous quagmire, is now soft, yielding beneath your worn boots. You see a tiny green shoot pushing through the still cold earth, a fragile testament to the persistent will of life. Your heart gives a small, unexpected lurch. You walk to your field, the same field that betrayed you last year, and your eyes, still haunted by the past, scan the soil with a mixture of dread and desperate longing. The ground is still sodden in places, but there are patches where the earth seems to be drying, cracking into a network of small fissures. You dig your fingers into the soil and it feels different. Not cold and lifeless, but with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. A hint of the life stirring beneath the surface. The seeds you meticulously saved, a precious, dwindling store from before the famine, are now your most valuable possession. You handle them with reverence, a sacred trust. You had to eat some of them during the darkest days, a choice that tore at your soul, but you held back as many as you possibly could, clinging to the desperate hope of a future harvest. Now, with aching limbs and a pounding heart, you begin the back-breaking work of preparing the soil. Every clod you break, every furrow you turn, is an act of faith against the crushing weight of memory. The sun, when it appears, feels stronger now, more insistent, though still a fickle presence in the often cloudy sky. You feel its warmth on your face, a forgotten sensation that brings a wave of profound, aching relief. You spend hours in the field, moving slowly, deliberately, your body protesting with every movement, but driven by a renewed, if fragile, purpose. You talk to the earth, you whisper prayers to the seeds, imploring them to grow, to provide, to grant you and your family a reprieve from the grip of death. You see other villagers, those who survived, also venturing out to their fields. Their movements are slow, their faces still gaunt and etched with the scars of famine, but there is a new, quiet determination in their eyes. They work in silence, a collective understanding of the immense stakes. The usual chatter, the complaints about the weather, are absent. Only the rhythmic scrape of hoes against earth, the heavy breathing of the laborers, and the distant caw of a crow break the solemn quiet. The community, though fractured, is unified by this shared, desperate act of planting. As the weeks pass, you witness the miracle. Tiny green shoots emerge from the earth, fragile and vulnerable, but undeniable. They are sparse in some places, but they are there. You watch them with a hawk's vigilance, protecting them from birds, from pests, from the whims of the weather. Every morning you rush to the field, your heart in your throat, to see if they are still there, if they have grown, if the promise of life continues. Each day that passes without blight, without a devastating storm, feels like a monumental victory, a small step back from the precipice. The village slowly begins to stir with faint signs of recovery. A few new births, though rare and fragile, bring a fragile ripple of joy. The blacksmith's hammer, once silent, now rings out with a hesitant, irregular rhythm, signaling that someone has found the strength and the need to repair a tool. The weaver's shuttle begins its gentle clack, creating fabric for the threadbare community. These are not booming sounds of prosperity, but faint whispers of life, tentative steps towards rebuilding. Then comes the real miracle. The harvest. It is not abundant, not by any measure of a good year, but it is there. It is enough to survive. You stand in your field, your hands trembling as you cut the stalks of grain, your eyes blurring with tears of profound relief. The sight of the golden kernels, plump and real, is almost too much to bear. You bring the sheaves back to your hut, your heart overflowing with a gratitude so intense it feels like a physical ache. You have food, real food. The first true meal after the harvest is not a feast, but a simple, almost sacred act. Elara grinds a small portion of the new grain, her movements slow but deliberate. The aroma of freshly milled flour, a scent you thought you might never smell again, fills your small hut, rich and comforting. She bakes a small, flat bread over the embers, and you watch it rise, the small bubbles forming on its surface, a miracle of transformation. When it's ready, she breaks it into portions. You hold your piece, warm and fragrant in your trembling hands. The crust is rough, the texture dense, but the taste is beyond description. It is sweet, earthy, wholesome. It is not just sustenance, it is life itself. You chew slowly, savoring every crumb, your stomach so long a source of agony, now filling with a comforting warmth. Thomas, his eyes wide, eats his portion with a quiet intensity, his small hands clutching the bread as if it were the most precious treasure. You watch him, tears streaming down your face, a profound, aching love for him, for Ilara, for this simple, life-giving bread washing over you. This is not the end of suffering. The village is still scarred, the memories still raw. The children are still fragile, the adults still weak. But there is a sliver of hope, a fragile, hard-won victory against the crushing might of the famine. The silence of death has been replaced by the quiet sounds of rebuilding, of planting, of living. You look at your family, your surviving son, the precious bread in your hands, and you know that you have pulled back from the brink. The famine has left its indelible mark, but life, against all odds, has found a way to reassert itself. This glimmer of hope, though tenuous, is enough to carry you forward, one slow, precious step at a time, away from the abyss and towards a future that, for the first time in what feels like an eternity, does not promise certain death. Your modern world knows the comfort of assured meals. You now know the profound, soul-shaking relief of a life saved by a single loaf of bread. The famine has receded, its immediate terror replaced by the cautious stirrings of rebuilding. But its legacy is a debt you will carry for the rest of your days. You survived, yes, but survival is not simply the absence of death. It is a profound transformation, a harrowing education in the brutal fragility of life. The experience has etched itself into your very being, shaping your actions, your thoughts, your fears, and your understanding of the world. Your body, though no longer actively starving, bears the indelible marks of what it endured. The constant aches, the persistent weakness, the digestive ailments, these are your companions. You will never again possess the robust strength of your youth. The very act of eating, once an unconscious pleasure, is now a ritual infused with a profound sense of gratitude and a lingering anxiety. Every meal is a reminder of the months of emptiness, every morsel a precious gift. You find yourself unable to truly relax around food, always aware of its presence, always guarding against its potential absence. The sight of even a small amount of waste makes your stomach clench with an old, visceral pain. You are perpetually frugal, a habit carved into your soul by scarcity. The mental and emotional scars run even deeper. The shadow of hunger will forever lurk at the edges of your consciousness. A cloudy day, a rumor of poor crops, a slightly lower yield, each triggers a jolt of fear, a primal panic that transports you back to the famine's grip. You are hypersensitive to signs of deprivation, constantly assessing the health of your animals, the state of your neighbors' fields, the political stability of the region. The world, once a place of relative predictability, is now perceived as a fickle, dangerous landscape, capable of snatching away everything you hold dear at a moment's notice. The memory of the unspeakable choices you faced, the dark thoughts that whispered in your starving mind, are a constant, heavy burden. Alice is gone, and the silence of her absence is a pervasive ache. That decision, that moment of agonizing parental triage, has created a wound that will never heal. You look at Thomas, your surviving son, with a love so fierce it borders on desperation, but also with a shadow of what was lost, what was sacrificed. The knowledge of what hunger can drive a human to do, what it drove you to consider, is a chilling, profound understanding of humanity's darkest depths. You carry the burden of having seen that darkness within yourself. Your relationship with Ilara is forged anew, stronger in some ways through shared trauma, but also irrevocably altered. The innocence and carefree joy of your early life together is gone, replaced by a deep, somber bond built on shared grief, unspoken understanding, and the quiet, fierce determination to protect what little remains. You find comfort in her presence, a solace in knowing that she understands, that she carries similar scars. But the ghost of Alice will always be a third presence between you, a silent testament to the famine's cruel toll. The community, too, lives with this debt. The old trust has been eroded, replaced by a cautious guardedness. You see it in the eyes of your neighbors, the lingering suspicion, the memory of desperate acts. There is a sense of collective trauma, a shared history of suffering that binds you, but also a knowledge of each other's vulnerabilities and failures. Rebuilding is not just about physical structures. It is about painstakingly, slowly, rebuilding social bonds that were shattered by the crucible of starvation. This will take generations. You will teach Thomas, not just with words, but with your very being, the lessons of the famine. He will grow up with the understanding that food is not a given, that it is hard-won, that it is precious. He will learn to be thrifty, to work diligently, to respect the earth, and to always save for the lean times. The fear of hunger will be in his blood, passed down through the very cells of your shared ancestry, an inheritance of caution and resilience. The experience has fundamentally redefined your understanding of wealth and value. A full granary, a healthy field, a thriving pig. These are now the greatest riches, far more valuable than any coin or finely wrought object. The simple act of breaking bread, of sharing a meal, has become sacred, a communion with life itself. You have learned that true wealth lies in sustenance, in health, in the continuity of your family and your community, not in fleeting luxuries. When you hear stories of kings and queens, of lavish feasts in distant castles, you feel a profound disconnect. Their world, their concerns, their abundance seem alien, almost obscene, compared to the brutal reality you have lived. You have seen the true face of power, and it is the power of the earth to provide or to withhold. The grand narratives of history feel utterly distant from the visceral, immediate reality of survival that has defined your existence. The debt of survival means that a part of you will always be living in the shadow of that famine. You will never truly escape it. It is the filter through which you view the world, the quiet whisper in your mind, the persistent ache in your bones. It is the profound gratitude for simple warmth, for clean water, for the miracle of a full stomach. Tonight, as you lie in your warm bed, your stomach full, the world outside your window bustling with the endless abundance of modern life, you are worlds away from this reality. You can order food with a few taps on a screen, choose from an endless variety, take for granted that the shelves will always be stocked. That is a luxury your ancestors could not even dream of. The debt of survival from a medieval famine is a legacy of constant vigilance, of profound gratitude, and of an indelible scar that reminds you of the terrifying, raw truth of what it truly means to be human, and how utterly dependent we are on the fragile generosity of the earth. Remember this story as you drift to sleep, and perhaps, just perhaps, you'll carry a little piece of that hard-won gratitude into your own abundant life.